Hi guys, Viking Reefing here. So my 1000 liter reef tank has now been set up for about a year. I believe I got water into it and transferred everything over on the 6th of December last year, so a little over a year. So I thought it would be a good idea to do kind of a review of the first year with this tank. To go over, well, both the good and the bad aspects that I've encountered with this new tank. Um, in summary, I'd say that this has been the most fun tank I've ever had, and also the most challenging tank I've ever set up. So let's get into it. I think I'll start off with the negative aspects first, which I've encountered, and then we'll end on a positive note. So, bad stuff. Well, I've never had a tank that has had this many issues when it comes to nutrients, both high and low, which in turn has led to issues with both cyano and dinoflagellates. The dinos I got in this tank were not the variety that goes up into the water column, so I had a real battle on my hands to get rid of those. UVs didn't work. The only times I've had dino issues in the past, I've simply increased the flow to my UV sterilizer and they've been gone in a matter of a week or so. Also, cyano has been popping up relatively frequently. I think I've had 3 major outbreaks during one calendar year, which is very rare for me. I think I've never had this many cyano outbreaks in one year. I usually get some spots of cyano during the springtime for whatever reason, but that's basically what I'm used to dealing with. And they generally don't really form any thick mats that covers everything, which they have done in this tank. I think one of the main reasons why this has been happening is that I've used a fair amount of dead material setting up this tank. I did, of course, save all my live rock and stuff from my previous tank. Most of it sits in my sump, but I did use a bunch of artificial rocks, both the Aquaforce Life rocks and the ceramics from Arca. This isn't to say that these things are bad in themselves. It's just that when I usually set up a tank, it has more or less all live rock in the past. So I believe that, firstly, this dead rock soaked up a huge amount of phosphates, which, well, crashed my phosphates, which in turn led to the outbreaks of dinos. And my understanding is that they will eventually start releasing all that bound up phosphate, which led to very high phosphate, which in turn threw out of my nutrient balance between nitrates and phosphates, which has led to a bunch of cyano issues. Luckily, it looks like those issues are in the rear view mirror at this point. Knock on wood. What seems to have really helped was when I dosed cyano cleaner from Modern Reef. It got rid of all the cyano from my tank, and I've also added more sand sifters and increased my maintenance of my sand bed, which seems to be keeping me at bay. So fingers crossed I won't have any issues moving forward. This is still a relatively young tank. In my experience, a reef tank won't really mature before the 1 year mark, so I'm expecting to see some more stability moving forward. I also had a huge issue with an iodine spike. I was adding Katagrove from Brightwell, and it doesn't really list iodine as one of the elements that it adds. But unfortunately, I think it's a preservative or something. it contains potassium iodide, which does add iodine, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. Most reef tanks are deficient in iodine. Mine has been in the past as well. But it seems that this additive is kind of unbalanced because the things like iron and potassium that it's supposed to be adding, they were still very low, but my iodine was sky high, which caused a bunch of problems. Iodine is even a sterilizing agent, so I think I had. I need to go back and check, but I believe I had about 10 times the amount of iodine that you should be having in a reef tank. And at those levels, I'm willing to bet that it killed off some of my beneficial bacteria, which also caused a bit of a cyano bloom after that, of course. Those high iodine levels also killed off a very big maxima clam, which was kind of a devastating blow for me. I've had bad luck with clams during the past few years. They always seem to be coming in sick. I've never had any issues with clams in the past. But this clam was doing great. I had it for about 6 months. It was growing, nothing was picking on it or anything. But yeah, unfortunately, it succumbed to those high iodine levels. Crustaceans and mollusks are especially sensitive to high iodine. It also nuked a very, very big strawberry shortcake colony. It was almost dinner plate sized, and that started RTNing overnight. So I still have a couple of very large frags of it that I managed to save. Those high iodine levels also led to very poor coloration on my SPS, which is still a problem, but since the issue itself has been remedied, the color is slowly coming back, so that's very good. I've also had some losses this year. I generally don't lose fish that often, but this year I've had some rotten luck and some things are, well, my fault. I lost my big Moorish idol, Fat Frank. I had him for a number of years. He was doing great. He was loving life in this tank, and one day when I walked down, he had a big cut on his beak, and he was very lethargic, just sitting up in a corner. And unfortunately, he died a couple of days later. Since I never really had any issues with Moorish idols, I managed to find another very good specimen, like half a year later or something like that. I kept it in QT for a couple of weeks. It was eating great, both frozen and pellets, and then I added it to my main tank. I did suspect that there would be some aggression, mainly from the Achilles tang and the Goldfish Angel, because they're both, well, kind of assholes. But that aggression usually dies down in, say, 3 to 4 days. I tried to do my utmost to have a smooth transition for the idol, so I added it during the night, so they would basically just wake up in the morning and it would be there. If you're lucky, the established fish won't even realize that there is a new arrival. Unfortunately, that didn't really work because they really targeted the idol straight away. I put up mirrors and stuff like that as well. Still didn't help. The goldflake, he backed off after a couple of days, but the Achilles, he just kept beating on that poor fish. Which makes me suspect that it might have been the Achilles that stressed my old idol enough for him to crash into something, which caused some sort of a brain hemorrhage. I realized too late that the situation was very dire for the idol, so when I pulled him out of the tank, he had a very bad eye injury and a fairly deep slash right across his belly. I put him in my sump in my refugium. Luckily, he was eating, but The major issue was that the eye injury wasn't healing quickly enough. Uh, so he had some real trouble targeting the food. He was missing most of the times he tried taking like a piece of mysis or something. Um, and unfortunately, since idols have a extremely high metabolism, he just couldn't get enough food into him, and he unfortunately kicked the bucket after, I believe it was 3 weeks or so. The eye was almost healed at that point, which is even more annoying. I've also lost a couple of fish to pumps, which is a new phenomenon for me. A very small peppermint hogfish got sucked into one of my octo 4s and, well, got blended basically. Um, and I also added a very small similar Vartus butterfly fish, say 6 or 7 months ago, and that also got sucked into a pump. Speaking of losses and similar Vartus butterfly fish, I had a large specimen in this tank for about 4 or 5 months, and a couple of days ago I lost it. I have no idea what happened. We were away for about 7 days over the Christmas weekend, and when I came back, it was sitting at the topmost right corner of the tank, being really lethargic, breathing heavy, and its fins were kind of tattered. I tried feeding, and it showed no interest in food whatsoever. So I made the decision to pull it and put it in my quarantine tank. Um, After which it actually started feeding again, and the rapid breeding was slowly starting to become less labored and not as quick. So I was very hopeful that it might survive because I couldn't see any real physical ailments on it. Unfortunately, the following morning or the morning after that, I came down to check on it, and it was lying dead on the bottom of the QT tank. I did a post-mortem on it as well, to see if there were any issues with internal parasites or something like that, but I really couldn't find any evidence to support that. So this is still a mystery to me, what happened. My neighbor, he was feeding the fish 2 days before we came back. He sent a video when it was all good. It was swimming around eating like a pig, like it usually does. The Summer of Artists is one of my dream fish. I saw them a couple of decades ago when I was diving in the Red Sea, and I have always wanted to have one in my reef tank. I will take stock and evaluate if I did something wrong um, that caused its demise. My two main suspects are either some sort of a bacterial infection or that I neglected some sort of nutrients in its diet that led to it croaking. However, it was very fat and healthy when it died, so I'm leaning towards bacterial infection as the most likely culprit. But it hasn't been all doom and gloom, of course. Like I've said, I've never had so much fun with a tank like I've had with this one. I've never had this big of a reef tank before. The biggest one I've ever had in the past was about 800 liters or 720 liters or something like that. And having a tank this size really opens up options for you, both in terms of aquascaping, fish selection, and the amount of corals you can have. So being able to keep the fish that I keep and not having them cramped, for example, seeing the Achilles just shoot around in this huge tank has been super rewarding. Even though I've had some instabilities in terms of my parameters and some setbacks, my coral growth and health has been very good, and I've managed to source some very nice corals. Both a couple of nice torches, but mainly very nice SPS colonies that has been doing great. The majority of new stuff that I added to this tank has been wild-caught colonies. I believe I've added 6 or 7 of them, and I've had just one single loss, which in terms of wild-caught stuff is very good in my opinion. I generally calculate losing at least 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 or something like that. This tank, even though it's quite a large system, is actually super easy to maintain. I put a lot of thought into my setup before setting this tank up to keep it as simple to maintain as possible. For example, the sump room has been a godsend to have. It makes water changes super simple. I can just run a pump into the sump and just pump out all the dirty water into the sink, and just pump back, say 100 or 200 liters of water, and I can make a 10% water change in about 15 minutes tops, which is awesome. The automation I've put into this tank has also really increased the quality of life. The best thing I've ever added to a tank is definitely the KH director. I've had it for some weeks at this point, and it's such a quality of life change. I hate testing, so it's really nice to have someone do that for you. It also calibrates my ALK dosing and in turn calcium magnesium dosing as well. So that's one more thing that I don't have to worry about. I also have a very good fleece roller now. I used to have a Clear C, which caused more trouble than it solved. But the one I'm using now from Arca is completely maintenance free, basically. Very easy to change rolls and stuff. So that has taken a lot of maintenance time away that I used to have to spend on the tank. The GHL Proflux has also been a very good addition. I used it on my previous tank as well, but I use it for more automation now. The best thing I'm doing with it is I let it control my ORP and in turn my ozone reactor. I haven't used ozone for a number of years, and that also really does help with reducing maintenance because it keeps your water crystal clear. It keeps out a lot of toxins and stuff from your tank, or at least breaks them down. So you don't have to do that many water changes like you would if you relied on water changes to remove those things. I'm not a big fan of activated carbon either for water clarity because it waxes and wanes, and it's always a pain to replace. It always gets dirty and messy, and you put it off for far too long. So yeah, the ozone edition has been awesome. I don't know why I didn't run one for such a long time, since I've also had very good results in the past running one. Apart from maintenance, if we're still on equipment, the Giesemann Aurora V8 has been a great light. It's kind of hard to illuminate a tank this size because generally there's very few options available for you on the market if you don't want to use a huge amount of LED fixtures, and then you have to deal with wires and crap all over, and it just looks messy. So this has been a great addition to this tank. It keeps the amount of wires running over the tank to a minimum, and it looks very sleek as well. And it's wife approved, so that's always a positive. I'm also very happy with the dimensions of this tank. I was debating about going for a height of 65 centimeters or 70 centimeters. I ended up going for 65 centimeters, and I think that was the right decision. If this was a 70 centimeter tall tank, even though I'm a fairly tall guy at 190 centimeters, I would have difficulty reaching most parts of the tank, to be honest. And well, kind of building in those difficulties in your system, that will ensure that you're not doing the maintenance that really is needed, because we're all kind of lazy, and if it's a pain to do something, we put it off. If I would be doing a peninsula tank, well, this is actually a peninsula tank, but it's not, it's sitting against the wall. But if I would have one as a room divider, I would definitely go for a 70 centimeter high tank, though, because the height does look impressive, and if you can access it from all sides, that would kind of alleviate a lot of the problems with that height. I'm also very happy about the stand that I built. It was kind of cheap to build it. I believe I paid around 400 euros or something in material costs, and I think it turned out great, if I may say so myself. I was quoted somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 euros for a stand from the aquarium manufacturer, and I thought that was a bit excessive. And I don't think they would have been able to do a better job than I did, honestly. So that was basically just a quick review of this first year with the tank. As I said, there's been both positive and negative aspects of my first year with it. But I'm fairly confident that the next update I'll do in a year will contain even more positive stuff and less negative stuff. Hopefully, if I don't do anything stupid. So what are my plans for next year? Well, I do have some stuff in the works. Firstly, even though I said I'm very happy with my light fixture from Giesman, I will actually be replacing that in a few weeks, hopefully. The reason why I will be doing that is because Giesman asked me to test their new Aurora V12. The the V12 is basically the same light as I'm using, the V8, but the main difference is that it's all LEDs. I've only ever once ran a full LED setup. It was just when I was getting back into reefing after a couple of years break, and I had a horrible time with it, so I haven't used all LED fixtures since then. But this is actually the first fixture that I really like the layout of and look of. It has both focused pucks and diffused sections. So the main difference here is that they are going to be replacing the T5 bulbs with LED strip lights under a frosted covering, so it should give the same effect as having T5s. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's one more step into modern reefing, even though I'm kind of an old school reefer. I will also be doing something about my flow, because as I said in my previous video, I'm not too happy about my Octo pulse force. They're quite loud, and I have a very hard time doing a good program on them. I'm not entirely sure what I will be going with. The most likely candidate is MP40s from Ecotech, but we'll have to wait and see where I end up on that. Apart from the new equipment stuff that I'll be adding, my main focus for next year will be stability. I will try and make as few changes as possible in terms of the, for example, additives, chemical compositions of this tank, and things of that nature. The only major things that I'll probably change is, like I just said, my light fixture and flow pumps. But apart from that, I really want to keep the system stable and basically just let it settle in even more. In terms of livestock, I don't have anything really planned. I do want some more SPS colonies, mainly some cool tenuous, I think. And the only fish I'm really looking at the moment is probably adding one more similar orchis butterfly fish, because as I said, it's one of my dream fish. And there's also two more fish that I would really want to keep in this tank. I'm not entirely sure how feasible it is because they're both from Hawaii. So I'm going to do my best to see if I can firstly find them and then source them at a reasonable price. Reasonable is relatively speaking when it comes to these two species. It's a banded angel and a tinker butterfly fish. So both very expensive fish and hard to find. I'm really hoping that Hawaii will open up even more, which would kind of increase the supply of these fish in the hobby, which should bring down prices. So that's something I'm really hoping for. I think that's all I have for you today. I think I've covered most things that's been going on with this tank for the first year. I hope you like this rundown. And if you would like to support me, I would really appreciate it if you would, firstly, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the real subscribe button, which is the notification bell, because if you don't do that, you won't be notified when I upload. If you have any questions, please post them down below in the comments. I respond to each and every comment I get, so don't be shy. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one. Bye.